Last Thursday, the United States took decisive action to end the murderous scheming of Iran's chief terrorist.
President Trump does not have authority to go to war with Iran.
Qassem Soleimani had been spent numerous years masterminding attacks on American service members and our partners throughout the Middle East and expanding Iran's influence. Despite sanctions, despite prohibitions by the UN Security Council, he roamed throughout the region with impunity. His hands bore the blood of more American service members than anyone else alive. Hundreds of American families have buried loved ones because of him. Veterans have learned to live with permanent injuries inflicted by his terrorists. And in Iraq and in Syria and beyond, the entire region felt the effects of his evil tactics. We should welcome his death and its complication of Tehran's terrorism industrial complex. But we must remain vigilant and soberly prepare for even further aggression. Now, it is completely appropriate this decision would generate interest and questions from this body. We can and we should learn more about the intelligence and thinking that led to this operation and the plan to defend American personnel and interests in the wake of it. I'm glad the administration will hold an all-senators briefing on Wednesday. It'll be led by Secretary of Defense Esper, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Milley, Secretary of State Pompeo, and CIA Director Haspel. Unfortunately, in this toxic political environment, some of our colleagues rushed to blame our own government before even knowing the facts, rushed to split hairs about intelligence before being briefed on it, and rushed to downplay Soleimani's evil while presenting our own president as the villain. Soon after the news broke, one of our distinguished colleagues made a public statement that rightly called Soleimani a murderer, and then amazingly walked that message back when the far left objected to the factual statement. Since then, I believe all her criticism is directed at our own president.
Now, it's been 4 days since the United States carried out a military operation that killed Major General Qassem Soleimani, the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force. In the days since, I've become increasingly alarmed about the strike, a strike that was carried out with insufficient transparency, without consultation of Congress, and without a clear plan for what comes next. President Trump had promised to keep the United States out of endless wars in the Middle East. The president's actions, however, have seemingly increased the risk that we could be dragged into exactly such a war. It's indicative of President Trump's foreign policy record, which is riddled by chaotic, uninformed, erratic, and impulsive decision-making without adequate consideration for the consequences. In just about every foreign policy area President Trump touches, we're worse off than we were before he started with it. With China, North Korea, Syria, Russia, the president has careened from one impulsive action to the next with no coherent strategy. North Korea today, despite what President Trump said, we don't have to worry about him, is a greater nuclear threat than they've ever been. Trump's actions have been disastrous. North Korea has more nuclear weapons and, by all reports, has either developed or is very close to developing an ICBM that can hit the United States mainland. And that is a result of President Trump's bumbling. The situation in Syria is much worse than before. Doing what he did in Syria, pulling out those troops, made no sense to anybody, even the most hawkish foreign policy people we have. And every time the president seems to deal with Putin, Putin seems to come out ahead. Looking at the president's chaotic and rudderless foreign policy in hotspots around the globe, it's hard to conclude that any of the situations are better off than when the president took office 3 years ago. His policies seem to be characterized by erratic, impulsive, and often egotistical behavior with little regard to a long-term strategy that would advance the interests of the United States. At times like this, it's essential for Congress to provide a check on the president and assert our constitutional role in matters of war and peace. In my view, President Trump does not have authority to go to war with Iran.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.